I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Across the Grid. And I am Matt, and I am not joined today by my friend and yours, Eddie Ekwo, who is finally taking some well-deserved time off to not look at scores, not look at any NFL action, but I can guarantee that while he's on holiday with his family, that's exactly what he will be doing anyway. But fear not, I'm still here to take you through a brief recap of Week 16 because it's probably not the best time for me, Eddie, to be away on various holidays and work trips because so much has happened in the last weekend in the NFL. We've had playoff contenders confirmed. We've got teams dropping off. It's all happening. So we thought between me and Eddie, it would be remiss for us not to at least record a short episode to fill you in and give some of my takes on what's happening in the NFL at the moment as the season ramps up. So, look, Week 16 didn't just give us, entertaining games like it always does. It actually reshaped the whole playoff race. It exposed some teams who were faded at the worst possible time. And it confirmed that this season has been one of the best sort of turnaround seasons that I think we've seen in a long time. So rather than go through game by game and give in-depth analysis, because, that's really what Eddie is for. What we're going to do today is I'm just going to pick out some of the key games and really how it's helped shape the playoff races. And we'll start with the NFC, we'll go to the AFC, and then when me and Eddie are back together, we'll go through a lot of the bigger stories in greater detail, because obviously we need to talk about what the hell has happened in Miami with Tua being benched. We need to talk about Micah Parsons' injury. We need to talk about the Chiefs and all this kind of stuff that we all need to sit down and talk about. But we will save those for a proper review session with me and Eddie later on in a couple of weeks, probably now after Christmas. But let's start with the NFC. Right, and probably the biggest game in the NFC was in the NFC West. Now, this was a game that completely flipped that division almost on its head and completely changed how the playoff race in the NFC is looking, right? So the Seattle Seahawks came from behind and they beat the LA Rams 38-37 in overtime. And this was absolutely massive. The Seahawks came back from a 16-point fourth quarter deficit. They forced overtime and went for and converted a 2-point play to win. Now, this was a big shock for both myself and probably for Eddie, because when we've been talking about the NFC West, we've talked a lot about what coach do we trust the most, which quarterback do we trust the most. And while Sam Darnold has absolutely been fantastic over the last couple of seasons, Matt Stafford has been MVP caliber, and go into a big crunch game like this, we just would have thought, this is going to be on Stafford. He's going to run it. We trust him the most, and he's one who's going to force his game. But it didn't happen that way. Darnold obviously led his team in overtime to take that win. So what does that actually mean to the playoffs? So not only does the Seahawks jump into control of the NFC West, they actually go to controlling the entire NFC playoff seedings. They go from 7th to the 1st seed, right? Whereas with the Rams, they go from feeling like the top seed contenders in the NFC. And I've said all along, certainly the past few weeks, these are my AFC champion picks. So NFC champion picks. These are the team that I fancied going all the way to the Super Bowl. But as it stands, they drop all the way back to 6th seed, right? They lose that home field advantage. They lose that bye week that they would have claimed by taking top seed. So from a Seahawks perspective, this isn't just a big win in a single match. This is a big game for potentially for the rest of the season and for the playoffs. So, this is a reminder really to me that momentum really does matter when it gets to like December football. And, Seattle certainly has that right now. Let's move on and let's look at another huge game. in the NFC North. This was the Bears versus the Packers. Now, we have talked about, I kind of lose track of how many times Eddie and I have said that the Bears have been the surprise package of this season, but they can no longer be a surprise package if they keep winning games. And once again, they have beaten the Green Bay Packers. This time it was in overtime, 22-16. And again, this one continuously feels like a momentum shift. They now sit on top of the NFC North. They sit second in the NFC conference seedings, and they have, and all that, the Bears have clinched themselves a place in the playoffs. Whether that's second or further down, but they have, they have gone ahead and they've clinched that play position. So, which is just absolutely fantastic. And for me, the headline here is Caleb Williams. Yeah, over the past sort of few weeks, Williams has looked every single bit like this franchise quarterback who the Bears thought they had drafted, right? He's calm in the pocket. He's aggressive when he needs to. And he's making big throws late in the game. And he is driving that team to success. In this particular game, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and that touchdown pass, for me, it was a statement touchdown pass, not just for the season, but for what Chicago may be building in the future. So, the playoff is locked in. They are now firmly in that conversation for home field advantage. And they've gone from this nice story surprise package. So they are genuinely dangerous in the playoffs. And, what makes us even more impressive, this is going to be a running theme when we go through this, is Chicago had a losing record last year. I can't remember how many games they won off the top of my head, but they've gone from a losing record to confirming themselves in the playoffs, potentially having a bye week, home field advantage. This is a fantastic turnaround and, fantastic indictment. Sorry, a fantastic example of what can be improved with a bit of patience and correct coaching for franchise quarterbacks. Let's move on to the NFC South because this is slightly a contrast, shall we say. And in this one, we had the Carolina Panthers beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Carolina Panthers obviously taking control now of the NFC South. And it wasn't just another result. This confirmed a trend. I mean, I remember very, very back early in the season, I actually put Tampa Bay as sort of my dark horses to potentially go on and take the NFC. But they've lost 3 straight. I think they've only won 1 in the last 6. I mean, they have fallen off badly. The offense looks completely out of sync, and they're doing this at the worst possible time. And, earlier on the season, they had a lot of players out injured, but we kept saying that when these players are going to come back, they're going to be dangerous. But the exact opposite has happened. And, they've the look or the drive that Baker Mayfield has had has slowly slipped away, and they're falling away at the bad time. And now this division is Carolina's to lose. And again, we've seen with Caleb Williams. For me, looking at Carolina side, this was another big step forward for their quarterback, Bryce Young. 191 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and it's been tough for Bryce Young, but he's beginning now to show, he's got command of the line, he's been able to push the ball downfield, and it's the poise, and it's this poise that made him that number 1 overall pick a few years back. And a lot of Carolina Panthers fans, I'm sure would have been ready to throw Bryce Young onto the scrap heap of high pick quarterbacks. It hasn't happened, and it just shows, because I keep saying this. If you're a number 1 picked quarterback, you're going to a team who's not doing well, right? You're not going into a good team. You're going into a system that's probably not being productive, with a coaching system that's probably not being productive, right? It's so difficult for these young quarterbacks to actually go in there and thrive in their first season. Now, it's taken them a little bit of time, but Carolina, they're not quite confirmed yet because of just how tight that division is. But they are looking like pretty much surefire things for a 4th seed in the playoffs in the NFC, which is fantastic. And again, this team had a losing record last season. That's not an accident. Fantastic, fantastic achievement for everyone at Carolina. It's great work that they're doing there. So let's just step back and just look at the NFC sort of big picture at the moment. There's sort of three games we kind of wanted to look at there. The Seahawks are obviously now surging. The Bears are arriving. The Bears have arrived. The Panthers have risen. The Buccaneers are fading. The Rams are having that little bit of a wobble, but the 49ers are also doing incredibly well. They won their game. It was pretty much a walkover, 47-28 over the Colts. But what is a common thread across a lot of those teams? It's quarterback development, and there's the belief in what you're doing. I think the NFC is looking incredibly, incredibly strong. And we've said for a while now, Eddie and I, that the NFC is probably the most competitive conference in the NFL at the moment. Obviously, we're not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about the East. We're not going to talk about the Cowboys or the Eagles. We do that too much when Eddie's here. So this is a Cowboys corner free zone this week, everyone. But the Eagles, they continue to win without looking too impressive. They've clinched their playoff spot. Cowboys are eliminated. We all already knew that. But I think the talking point is that in the NFC is elsewhere in this division. So that's the NFC. Now let's move over to the AFC because again, there were some really important games happened in the AFC. No more so that I think the biggest statement game in the AFC this weekend was the Jaguars versus the Denver Broncos. Right. Trevor Lawrence now looks like the guy, I think. Certainly the Jaguars hoped they had drafted back in 2021. This was a statement win, I think, for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think they won the London games. They didn't play very well, probably lost. And a lot of questions were being asked. A lot of questions being asked of Lawrence, who'd been incredibly inconsistent to poor, certainly for the beginning of the season, sorry. But now the question is, they started winning some games, but can they do it against, some of the better teams in the division, some better teams in the conference? They go to the Denver Broncos, who were first seeds, who again have surprised many by being first seeds, I think it's fair to say. And they've gone and won 34-20 and pretty much won it in a dominant fashion. So this is a big, big moment, I think, for Trevor Lawrence, because he is, over the past couple months, certainly since that game in London, he's cut down the mistakes. He's been controlling game in the pockets and he's made tough throws under pressure. And looking at the game against Denver, 279 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And suddenly you're seeing why he went number 1 overall in 2021, right? So fantastic for the Jaguars, fantastic for Trevor Lawrence. And now the Jaguars have moved into serious AFC seeding sort of contention. Currently 3rd seed. They're only 1 game behind now the Broncos and the Patriots. They're both 12-3. The Jaguars are 11-4. And again, as we've said many times in this already, they had a losing record last season, right? Nobody's going to want to go into the playoffs playing Jacksonville the way that they're playing at the moment. For the Broncos, they're still the top seed, but their hit for this race, the top seed has taken this race. Sorry, they have taken a hit in this race for a bye. They're still 12-3. They're still top seeds. They're still level with the Patriots, who we'll come on to in a bit. But this could be a wake-up call for them. The Broncos have won many close games this season, but where you deserve to be in the NFL. They deserve to be the top seed. But this might give them a bit of a wake-up call, right? To say, well, okay, well, are we really the best team in the AFC? Can we take teams like Jacksonville for granted? No, you can't. So, when they go into playoffs, they're locked in now to the playoffs. This might be a wake-up call that they need to help really push them towards that Super Bowl. Another team we're going to look at, this is a team sort of just hanging around a little bit in the AFC, but fair play to them, and that's the Houston Texans. So, they edged past the Las Vegas Raiders to keep the AFC South, wide open, right? They're not confirmed, but their win did confirm a few people's places in. They're 10-5 in the AFC South. The Colts lost again. The Texans are pretty much now guaranteed. It's just whether they can finish any higher than 7th seed. I think that's looking unlikely. Although they're only a game behind the Bills, I can see the Bills just winning out. But the Houston's defense have been great. They've been on a remarkable run in recent weeks, and Houston aren't flashy, but they're disciplined, they're competitive, and are keeping it alive. And this win keeps the pressure on Jacksonville. Is keep the pressure on the entire division. But I think the Houston Texans could be sort of one to watch. Could be a bit of a dark horse as we get into the playoffs. Let's move on now and let's talk about a game that affected sort of both divisions. Obviously, AFC versus NFC match here, and that's the Steelers versus the Lions. Now, for me, this shows that Pittsburgh's grit that they have, that really matters, right? This was classic Steelers football. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't dominant, but it was clutch, right? And let's not forget, this was a team that was calling for Mike Tomlin's head a few weeks ago. The fans had turned, it was looking nasty, and you were going into these games thinking that, can Tomlin hang on to his coaching position going into next season? There were a few questions being asked, but with the Ravens losing to the Patriots, which we'll talk on a little bit about briefly, they're now looking certainties for the playoffs again, right? As the 4th seed, right? So it strengthens their position. What they're gonna have to do as a franchise is improve on their playoff record, because they've been 0-1. I can't remember the last time they actually won a game in the playoffs, or certainly won more than one game in the playoffs. So that's going to be the big test for them. Can Rodgers step up and show the kind of quality that's made him a Super Bowl winner, that's made him an MVP? Whereas Detroit, much like Tampa, as we were talking about previously, they feel like a team who are running out of margin for error now. It might have been a bridge too far. It's been a hugely disappointing season for Detroit, especially how well they did last season. And we are going to do some winners and losers once the regular season wraps up. But I think Detroit will be overall very disappointed of how the season can go. It's not out of the question yet, I don't think. So they're still on the bubble with an 8-7 record in the North, but they have to beat the Packers and hope a few of things go their way. It's not looking good for Detroit. Lessons to be learned going into the 2026 season. I'm sure. So let's move on to another game that we look at. This was again one that I think was tougher to call than many people anticipated at the beginning of the season, beginning of the weekend, especially given their records. And this is the Ravens and the Patriots, and this was another sort of turnaround story. Now, the fact that the Patriots went and won this again, it ended up having quite big playoff repercussions, or implications, I should say, because New England have once again clinched their playoff position. I say once again, they haven't been in playoffs for a very long time. And this is someone as a Miami Dolphins fan, I hate saying it, but the playoffs do kind of feel a bit more complete with the Patriots in it. But this is a Tom Brady-less Patriots now. They look composed, and they are quietly completing a turnaround from last season. When we had, my good buddy Matt on at the beginning of the season, when we did a bit of a deep dive into the Patriots, we asked a question, do we think this is a team or a franchise that can come back this season? And no one was, we weren't really sure. Our mate Matt was certain that Drake May was the guy. And we were all talking that actually they're going to be in a race for sort of second position, because we all assumed Bills are going to run away with the division. But we thought Miami, we thought New York might provide more competition than they did. Wow, were we wrong on that one? Jesus Christ. But the New York have done incredible to turn this around. Again, once again, another team who was in a losing position is now clinched their spot in the playoffs. So fantastic for New England. Baltimore, on the other hand, another defeat in another really disappointing season. They dropped back to 0.5. Actually less than that. I think they're 8-7, so still got a losing record. There is a slight chance, a very, very slight chance, they can come back in the NFC North, but they have to win out now, and they have to hope that the Steelers drop. Just looking at the NFC website now, they've got Ravens in a 9% playoff probability. I'd suggest it's probably even less than that. So again, another hugely disappointing season for the Ravens, like it is with a number of teams in the AFC, like the Bengals, the Ravens, the Chiefs. These are all teams we assumed would be, guarantees in the AFC, and it just hasn't worked out. They look very fragile. It's a crowded AFC race, but yeah, disappointing for them. And yeah, look, so they're sort of the main games I kind of wanted to touch about. So let's look at this from a big picture. So how does this leave us now with 2 weeks left in the regular season? Right, it's actually a mirror image in both conferences. Right, in both the NFC and the AFC, we have 5 teams who have secured their place in the playoffs. Right, there are 2 teams remain in the hunt in that kind of 4th seed and 7th seed, and then we've got 2 teams on the bubble. Although, let's say on the bubble is maybe being a bit generous. They're still mathematically in with a chance, although that's unlikely. There's still a lot that can change, and there's still a lot of home field advantages and an all-important bye to play for. So we've still got 2 really interesting weeks to come in the NFC. But if we zoom out, let's just look at the overriding theme that we've talked about many times. And this is a bit I certainly find the most interesting. As you look at some of the teams, you look at the Patriots, look at the Jaguars, you look at the Bears, you look at the Panthers. Now, 3 of those, obviously I'm not including the Panthers in this, have locked in their place at the playoffs. All of them had losing records last season. So what has actually changed in that? For me, it's down to 3 things. One is quarterback development, because whether it's Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Trevor Lawrence, all those quarterbacks have now developed. They're better quarterbacks than they were last season. They're better quarterbacks, certainly than when they were in their rookie season. Coaching stability also helps. You take someone like Trevor Lawrence when he came into the Jaguars. I think he's on his 3rd or 4th, head coach now. As a young quarterback, that is not great for the development of a quarterback. Right, Caleb Williams is on his 2nd head coach. So having that stability, the coaching, really can help the development of quarterback. Right, you can find a system that works for them, and it gives them confidence. And I think you're seeing in all 4 of those cases now that that all those quarterbacks are benefiting from them. And from that benefit, it comes a final thing, which is belief. You're going into games thinking that we can win this. We are going to be contenders in this game. We've got a chance for the playoffs. Then I think it's, it makes such a big difference, and it really helps build that momentum. And you look at a lot of the teams who are in losing positions this season, who have either rookie quarterbacks or 2nd-year quarterbacks, whether you're the Browns, obviously whatever the hell's going on with the Dolphins at the moment, it gives you confidence, maybe whether it's a 2026 season or 2027 season. If we get these things right, then the playoffs isn't that far away, right? So all of this isn't fluke. It's organizations getting things right at the right time. Okay. Certainly in the AFC, we have seen a bit of fortune that we have seen big teams drop away. We've seen the Chiefs drop away. We've seen the Ravens drop away, and we've seen the Bengals drop away. So 3 teams you would have thought would be shoo-ins for the playoffs, but that hasn't happened because of injuries and the way the season works. It's not always case like that. So you have to get things right at the right time. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Eddie and I'm sure we'll be back soon to do a proper predictions episode, have a catch up with some of the big news and all the kind of stuff that that we have missed and not gone through in recent weeks. Obviously, for now, the only thing that I'm going to say, as Eddie always does, please like, share, subscribe, and do all that kind of fun stuff that we all like to talk about. I would say, Eddie, take us home. He's not here, so I'm going to have to take us home, and I have no idea how to do that effectively as Eddie does. So all I'm going to say is thank you for listening to me prattle on for the last sort of 25 minutes. Hope you've all enjoyed it. We'll be back soon across the gridiron. For now, I've been your host, Matt, and I will see you again soon across the gridiron.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the